Okay, so I am here at my lovely BLM campsite in Escalante, just outside of Escalante, Utah. Dan actually scored the spot before I got into town, and this is Rosie down here. He offered to help me with my solar, installing an inverter, and when I say help me, I mean he's doing all the work. This unit did come with solar. It came equipped with 200 watts of solar on the roof. However, that solar only powers 12 volt. So it only trickles in to light my lights and do a very few things. It does not power the outlets. If I'm hooked into shore power, I have power on my outlets. If I'm out here boondocking, I have no power in my outlets. I'm going to let Dan explain. We've done a little bit of just kind of recon this morning as to where we're going to install this inverter and everything, but I'm going to have him fill you in a little bit more about what the inverter does and why we're putting it in. I'm going to pass my little microphone to him.
Hello, everybody. Yes, this is an awesome boondocking spot. I'll have to tell Kat to turn this around so you can see what we're looking at right now. It's hard to look at the camera when you got that kind of view behind you. And the weather is perfect. So we're going to try to tackle several projects. This is the first one to pick up where Kat left off. The solar that comes on this rig is very minimal, 200 watts. It only charges the battery and only works for 12 volt, which means in a rig like this, in an RV, that means your water pump, your lights, your fan, things like that. And she cannot charge her laptop or use any electrical appliances without this device right here, which is an inverter. It takes 12 volt DC from a battery and makes it into 120 volt AC, which is what you have in your regular house. We're out here living, I'm full-time, just like Kat is, and we're out here living. We want to have at least some semblance of, normal life, and having 120 volts is really important. So that's what this will do for her. Fortunately and unfortunately, Keystone said it was inverter ready.
Keystone is the maker of the trailer.
Yes, her rig, this Keystone Mini, they did do a little prep, but very little. They left a lot of things out. I'm sure it's just to save money, but we'll get it all worked out. We're going to do it in several phases, and this will allow her then off of her batteries to run the 120 volt appliances. So this unit here, we'll show you in a minute where it's going to be installed. A very tiny space. We're going to go ahead and get it mounted in there and wired up and everything. And that's just phase one. We've got, I don't know, how many phases are we going to have here?
Well, we'll have solar panels, additional solar
panels. We have to upgrade the solar controller. We don't want to confuse you with all that right now, but we'll do it in segments. Hopefully that will make it a little bit more understandable. So this first one will just get her 120 volts AC like a house on her existing outlets.
This unit, unfortunately, was not set up that way. So for my very first edit, I used my Anchor portable batteries. Thankfully, I had those. So, but this will allow me just to use my onboard house batteries, which are not lithium yet, may go lithium down the road, but all these upgrades cost money, so a little bit at a time.
A little bit about the inverter itself that we're installing. For those of you, I'm sure there's quite a few viewers that have an idea what an inverter is or maybe even have one, but for the ones that don't, some inverters only come with plugs on the front of them, and that would be your 120 volt AC. But what we want to do is power the plugs inside the rig. So we got one that actually has a terminal block that we can hook up and hardwire into the camper. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be connecting 120 volt wires here. On the back side of it is where the big wires go. The wires basically have to be 10 times as large for 12 volt as they do for 120 volt. It's these two large cables together that have to go from red and black here to the battery. It will actually be drawing at max 190 amps. That's a lot, but that's the way it works with DC. So we will have to get these cables routed out through the front of the rig and to the battery. And we'll show you a little bit of that in just a minute, where it's going and how we're going to get those cables to the battery. All right, this compartment here is where we are going to install the inverter. We're looking at the wires right now that were pre-wired to the outlets, so that did save us a little bit. We'll still have to add a transfer switch. The inverter will be mounted to the ceiling of this compartment to get it out of the way. And then after it's connected to those wires, which provide the 120 volt, we come around to the front of the rig, and that's where the two batteries are currently. We will be drilling a hole through the front here, or coming underneath, and wiring those big wires to the batteries.
So Dan has been hard at work out here, and don't worry, I have been offering him food and water. He has done some more work and some updates, so I'm going to let him fill you in on what he's done here.
All right, we have done some additional prep work on the inverter. It's a lot easier to do out here on the table than it would be in that tiny little bay over there that we showed you. So let me show you what we've done and a couple other items that are very important about installing an inverter. First of all, an inverter should be installed as close to the battery as you can get it. So most inverters do come with cables, and hence they give you very short cables. These are 3-footers, and that's pretty standard if you buy almost any kind of inverter. We are going to be able to make these work because we are installing it that close, and they will just barely reach to the battery. But you want to keep this length as short as possible. One other item that's very important is a fuse. Now this fuse has to be sized based on the size of your inverter. This is a 2,000 watt inverter, and it works out that the maximum it can pull is 190 watts. So there's a 200 watt fuse there, and that is critically important.
It has been several days since we left you last, and Dan has gotten a ton of work done. It looks quite different underneath that cubby now. He's not only completed the inverter install, but he's also almost done with the solar install, which you will see on a separate video. I'll link that up here once it's done. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to him and let him explain to you what he's done.
As Kat just mentioned, the inverter install is finished, and a few things I wanted to include here specifically for the Keystone Mini owners. It may apply to other models, I do not know, but I now have experience with the Keystone Mini. They do indicate that it's inverter ready, or inverter prep is done, and that is true to some extent. There is a wire that is looped in the storage bay that you will need to cut, and one side is shore power and the other side of that wire are your actual outlets inside the RV. So that's how you would get the power from the inverter to those outlets. But one piece, several pieces that they do not include, is a transfer switch, and a transfer switch is absolutely required. It can be a manual switch, or what we put in is an automatic switch. So whenever it's on shore power, it will switch. When we turn on the inverter, it will switch to the inverter. So it automatically switches between the two sources. And that's probably the best way and safest way to do it. One additional thing for the Keystone Mini owners is the way that it's pre-wired. The shore power side of that circuit that we'll show you, or just showed you in a clip, is not just shore power. It actually includes the connections for your AC, for your microwave, and for the converter, which is how you charge your battery if you're plugged in. The other side is strictly the outlets. So what we're doing, we're going to actually wire in the microwave separately so that that can be run on the inverter also, but normally that is not included in the inverter circuit. This storage bay has been my home for the last week. Yes, I can fit all the way inside there, and had to do a lot of the install, but we'll show you here in just a second. Everything is installed either on the ceiling or on the front wall of it, so it's up out of the way for using it as a storage bay. Well, here we are in my temporary home away from home. I've spent a lot of time in here, but I'm going to point out the components and what was done to do all the final connections. Again, the one thing you can't see, but we've included a segment to show you is where I'm pointing is where the actual inverter prep was. It's up behind this transfer switch. So let's go through the components. There is the inverter. It's a 2000 watt inverter. Here is a 30 amp transfer switch. If you're doing a something other than a Keystone Mini, you would be sizing this either as a 30 or 50 amp, depending on what your rig is set up for. And then this item right here is the solar controller. I'll cover that in a lot more detail, along with the wiring and breakers and everything else on the solar video. So we've connected from the solar prep through these wires a 15 amp circuit to the terminal block on the inverter, and then that actually goes into the transfer switch. The transfer switch, again, as I mentioned how it works, it switches automatically between shore power and inverter power. And when I say inverter power, that's really solar power. That's coming from either the solar panels, the batteries, or both simultaneously. That will determine which one is plugged in, which one's being used, and switch. And then from here, it goes back out and supplies the power to all of the outlets in the RV. All right, just wanted to show you a little bit out here, what was done at the batteries themselves. So there's a lot here, so just kind of give you an idea. And starting with the batteries, as with any new RV, these batteries are not even true deep cycle batteries. They're called marine batteries. They're the cheapest. That's what RV manufacturers are going to install. I am sure a lithium battery reseller or manufacturer is going to be contacting Kat soon. With the size of her channel, what she really needs is 4 lithium batteries, which would be mounted inside that storage bay. So hopefully we'll be showing you a video on that in the near future. Just to cover what's coming out here, these large double cables here, positive and negative, are from the inverter. And then we have several other items for the solar, coming from the solar charger. I also wanted to point out this device right here. It's called a shunt. You don't really need to know that, but what's important is this device will measure exactly how much current is put into these batteries and how much current comes out of the batteries. So it's very important to monitor your battery usage. These lead acid batteries, you should only drain to 50% state of charge, which is around 12 volts. A lot of people don't know that, and they drain them down too far and they don't last long, whereas a lithium battery can actually go all the way down to 0 each cycle. So monitoring the state of charge, or how much capacity your battery has left, is very important. It's very important with a lithium battery, but it's extremely important with these lead acid batteries. The lead acid batteries, again, should never be drained below 50%. And the way we're going to know that is that shunt actually talks to a battery monitor, and it's a little display, a screen that we're going to mount inside. And we'll show you that part in the solar video, because it really ties the whole thing together between the inverter and the solar. Wrapping up the battery side of it, it is very important to size these cables correctly, as I mentioned, but it's also very important to size the cables between any batteries. So these are hooked up in parallel, 12 volts, and you need to size these properly. The wires that came with this rig were literally not even a quarter of this size. So we have sized these properly. There's a lot of connections in here, and with that many connections, normally you would want to use something called terminal blocks. Again, this is temporary until we get the lithium batteries installed inside.
And something that Dan has installed inside the trailer is an inverter on-off switch. That way I can remotely turn on and off the inverter from inside the trailer. It's important to keep the inverter off when you're not using it, because it does draw power itself.
So the inverter install is 100% complete and working perfectly. Again, this video was meant to be an overview and not a detailed technical how to do video. Gives you an idea what's involved. We were very fortunate in where we're at, out in the middle of nowhere almost, that we found some really kind people in town that basically let us use their 8-foot ladder and a great hardware store.
Yes, I definitely want to personally thank all the kind folks at the Do It Best Escalante Home Center for all of their help. They allowed us to receive packages there. They lent us a ladder. They made this whole production possible. So thank you all so much. If you're in the Escalante area, make sure you stop in and see the folks at that hardware store. It's the only hardware store in town. I'm really excited that now I have power to all of my outlets inside the trailer. I can use it just like I would a home. I have many outlets in there. I can get my videos edited and function properly in my new home. And I want to give Dan a huge thank you. He's a good human, did this out of the kindness of his heart and as a good friend. He's not for hire. He's retired, but he did this for me as a huge favor, and I am eternally grateful. Thank you so much, Dan.
You are welcome.
So that's going to do it for this inverter overview. Stay tuned for the solar install, and we'll see you soon.